we're all people in the end of the day. And then people, we've all got our own personalities. We all want to succeed in what we're doing. What success to everyone is could be slightly different based on what's currently in front of them. But we're all there to make sure we're heading in the right direction. As long as we're all, and I think there's a lot we do in this space to go, we've got trust to go, we can challenge each other.
Welcome to the CX Equation, a podcast by TAP CXM.
We share actionable insights and real-world case studies to equip you with the tools you need to drive loyalty, engagement, and sustainable growth.
We're your hosts, Chantelle Casey
and Mark Clydesdale.
On today's episode of the CX Equation, we're delighted to welcome Rob Grierson, who is Head of Group CRM, Customer Analytics and Innovation at Specsavers. Rob has spent more than 2 decades shaping customer engagement strategies at one of the world's most recognisable and trusted retail healthcare brands. From marketing analytics to CRM and analytics leadership, Rob has built frameworks that unite Specsavers' global teams whilst ensuring local markets thrive with autonomy and innovation. In today's conversation, we'll explore how Specsavers fosters a global community of CX collaboration, drives unified change across regions, and balances creativity with practical execution. Welcome to the podcast, Rob.
Great to be here.
I'll dive straight in, Rob. So you've grown your career at Specsavers, starting in analytics and now leading global CRM. How have you kept yourself inspired and challenged at the same company for 20 years?
This is a great question. I think one I ask myself quite often, actually, in terms of it's where I've worked actually my whole working career. And actually what keeps me motivated is if I think back to 2003 when I joined, Specsavers were in 3 markets. It was UK, Ireland, Netherlands. Actually, since then, we've grown and we've grown. And I think as businesses grow, technology grows, the way we work grows. And I think for me, that's really kind of how I guess what I've enjoyed within my career in terms of growing in new areas. And I haven't sat still. So I started off in location analytics. So really understanding how and where customers move around our stores, where can we open stores, to understanding more about our customer behaviour in terms of what do our customers do, how does it support trading, what are sales figures. And then I got my first touch in terms of CRM. And really understanding in terms of, from a customer perspective, how do we really engage with them? How do we remind them about coming back to us? And as we've grown as our regional teams, I've then moved into a global role, and not just in CRM, but thinking about digital. So learning new areas. We've, like a lot of companies, have had to evolve the way we work. And I've been, I'll say, lucky enough, fortunate enough to be in the right place at the right time and to really grow my career in those areas and expanding my knowledge beyond analytics to understanding about the customer, understanding digital. And actually where I am now is having that real think around what do we think about globally and working with actually a great set of people across the globe who are really key, really, I guess they really understand their area of CRM, analytics and those spaces. So it's really helped me keep motivated by how we as a business are growing, moving forward and keeping that innovation.
I had something similar. I actually worked for Morrison's for a while, and I thought about it because you talked about the location planning element. Our customer services team used to call it bomber command because we always had maps up of where stores could be located and things like that. But I thought I could be at Morrison's for my whole career because it was just so interesting getting to see how trading worked, how retail operations worked, how merchandising worked. Unfortunately, I got made redundant, but it's worked out for me at the end. But I do think a company has to have a good culture as well, and you have to enjoy working there if you're going to stay there for that long.
Yeah, I think definitely. I think with Specsavers, there's this whole thing, we are a family-run business. And actually, you see that from 22 years ago when I joined, a lot of it was based out of Guernsey, and I'm based out of Guernsey. But as we've grown, there's been a lot of effort of how do you carry on that family feel when you're in Australia, you're now in Canada, you're in Northern Europe, and you're more widely across the UK. And there's a lot of effort that goes into try and continue that feel of what is Guernsey is a very small island, and where you've got quite a lot of really talented people who are part of this business. So I think, that being in place creates a want to be here.
Yeah. And just on Specsavers culture, as a brand, Specsavers is well known for its care and quality. Within that mission, what does customer experience personally mean to you?
Well, I think, again, for me, if I look around that care quality, our purpose is to change lives through better sight and hearing. And I even think, actually, for me personally, but also when I've recruited people in the past, that whole mission in terms of, it's not just about the money. It's not just about going, where are we growing to make profit at the end? Yes, that's important, but actually we make a difference to people's lives. So when we start thinking about that customer experience, to me, it's such an honour to be part of that within a business, to actually, you are making a difference. Every part of our business does. And my perspective, with a focus on CRM, is that we're doing our bit to remind people, to encourage people to come back in, to care for themselves, to care for their sight and their hearing. So I'd say customer experience for me is so important to kind of how people can look after themselves in the future. Because, as I said, being able to see and hear is part of your life. And doing our bit for that makes you feel, as I said, quite honoured to do that.
Awesome. When one of the things that I didn't have at Morrison's that you have, Morrison's was a UK only business. Since I've been a consultant, I've got to work with lots of international businesses, and I always find that kind of global local split fascinating. Specsavers operates in, did you say 10 countries now? Each of those countries has their own market dynamic. Often you've got different languages. So how as in a global role, can you create kind of commonality between those regions and unification in what they're doing while still allowing them to kind of respond to their own local challenges?
For us as Specsavers, and probably a lot of companies, it's not straightforward to do. We, as a business, have grown. So a lot of that growth has come from actually in our regions organically taking what's part of the brand, but trying to move as fast as you can to grow the business and create that, I guess, that better change their lives through better sight and hearing. But those different dynamics, if you think about a basic level, the customer experience isn't that different. So actually what a customer needs is common. And what we kind of say is there's probably about 80% of these experiences across our markets, which would say are fairly similar. So you book an appointment, you probably need to have some sort of communication to remind yourself to come in. You have your appointment, you've got something that happens afterwards. So again, how do you care for a customer afterwards in terms of remind them, in terms of how best to use the product they've bought? How do you remind them about they've got a prescription they haven't bought? Or just setting themselves up for the next time. And then we've got one of our biggest areas is recall. And again, all the markets have to have a position where it works for us to remind customers to come back in for their appointment every 2 years. So even though there's different dynamics, at a really high level, the customer is going through similar experiences. So if we think about that, and like if I think a bit outside of, in our markets, our retail systems are different, but the challenge is to think about what are the, actually point around unifying, what are the similarities, actually focus on those. And actually focus on similarities, you don't get too distracted on, but we're different here, we're different there. Because if it's that 20% that's different, you're missing on a big opportunity. So the way we look at this is going, how do we best think about that from our customer journeys, the way we work across the teams, and actually how do we best use the platforms we have in place today. And I've kind of got a couple of examples that we've, I guess, as a global team, established over the last couple of years. So one of those is a global testing framework. So again, how do we create a global baseline for how we test within CRM to create a bit of, I guess, if we're going through different places, if we're operating in different markets, but we're testing similar areas, how do we make sure we build trust across the regions that what we're testing could be applied in another market? And another area is we've got a global approach and platform for email deliverability. So actually, this is really complex. So actually, to think about how our emails are reaching inboxes, and that's the landscape around us has changed so much in the last few years. For this to be looked at by our 3 or 4 different regional hubs, it takes a lot of time and effort, and you get probably slightly different approaches. So for us creating a global approach and bringing our colleagues from our markets along the process, and that creates a really great local understanding. And to your point around how do we make sure we respect that what we do locally, those people are the key bits to go, what can we do that's common? And what do we make sure we've allowed for and considered that is purely a local piece of work or a local approach. So I think there are challenges in doing this, but if you focus on the challenges, you won't get it done. Focus on the things which are similar, and then you can start driving some of those opportunities in that space.
So, for instance, that you mentioned the example of a testing framework there, a global testing framework. I can imagine, the local innovation versus shared global learning. There's a lot of obstacles involved, and you sort of go at heads with each other sometimes. What can you share a little bit about how it actually worked in practice and some of the challenges you came up against and how you combated some of those challenges?
In creating, I guess, a testing framework, it's not as if we weren't doing testing across our regions already. So a lot of these things are identifying we're all doing testing to different scales, depending on the size of the regional business. But how we were doing it wasn't as consistent as it could be. So one of the challenges we were trying to work with is if something's been tested in market A, market B might go, that's really interesting. Actually, what are the results from that? How have you got there? How did you implement that? And then we look in terms of how it's been done. They go, oh, we do it differently. We do it a different way. Can you just take the approach? So what we wanted to do is identify what should a baseline for a testing framework look like. So how do we build knowledge? How do we look at the tools we've got for testing? How do we build confidence? And how do we build kind of support around that to kind of create something called almost like a gold standard of MCM testing? And we looked to kind of develop kind of 3 areas: develop a common testing knowledge across the whole teams, learn how the CRM testing framework tools work that we have in place, and build confidence across the group. And we started thinking about the ways of how can we get people to or work with people to have a little hook. And the team who did this within my team, we've got Tammy and Vijaya. They did a great job in terms of building out all this training and getting a hook line of how do we have to talk about we know, not we think. We also have a challenge within, I guess, lots of businesses who aren't close to how you test is, can we just do X, Y, Z? And in that, you've got to go, well, we need to test it. We understand, is it going to work? So is that mindset of thinking is we know, because we've worked it out, we've tested it, and takes away the doing something because of we think it should work. So I think where I kind of look at this as well is part of driving this forward was having that also common language. So when you are speaking with a colleague in another market, you're talking about the same things. You're not talking about what you think is the same thing, but you have a different meaning. And we like to use the word steal with pride. So if you can test something in one market and you go, we want to take that to another, we want to steal with that. And we want to then go, there's a pride behind that and not feeling ashamed that you have to steal something. We're all trying to work to a common end goal or a common next stage. Let's steal what we've got. We haven't got the time to be doing things, as I said earlier, 3-4 times. So it was building that and linking it to our community that we have in place to make sure they have the most, and also ensuring post-training, they have a place to go. They can speak with other people, they can share. So it is a lot of work, but it has value. And we've had some really great free feedback. I think one bit of great feedback I kind of take is during the summer, I guess across the UK, you've got the email conference, advanced email conference, and we had Vijaya and Nicola from our UK team present together what they did in this space. So having both a region and the group global team talk about the success and how it's working, I think it's a great achievement of actually getting that into market and want to be able to then share that with the wider community outside of Specsavers.
Yeah, testing's such a fascinating one for me. Because I started as an analyst, as you did, Rob, and Chantelle's a fellow maths nerd. It's easy to come up with something you want to test, but saying this is how I am going to test it in a way that you are then confident that the result that you drive is going to be meaningful. You can conclude that your hypothesis is correct or not. That's one of the complicated bits, and I can very much see how, I'm assuming when you're talking about tools that we're giving regions, the way of calculating control groups and measuring statistical significance and all of those key things are in there.
Yeah, you've got that. So the things we sort of cover in that space are, as I said, how you test significance, how you log in terms of your ideas, and how do you create a knowledge base at the end. So those it's almost like a 3-factor way of thinking and working to create. And these are basic. We start off basic. We don't want to start to overcomplicate things. But by just having these places where the calculations are done in a common way to prep, make sure you know what you're going to test and you've got the right volume. That's a big thing for all of our regions to understand. And at least, as I said, talk in a common way to each other. But the bit we want to work towards, and this is even actually within a market, is how do we have that knowledge bank? Here's what we have tested. Here's what's been successful. And here's what's not been successful. They're all learnings. And being able to share that with other regions is also key, because actually what's not worked might help a region go, oh, what's not worked for X, Y, Z reason. Do we want to test that because we might have something else that might be a positive factor on it? Or do we go, actually, that's not on the top of our list anymore if it's not worked elsewhere? We've also got to be aware, just because it's worked in one market doesn't mean it'll work in all. Same as the other way around, but it gives us a starting point to work from.
So I guess it makes it a lot easier for people to share their wins as well. Like you say, maybe, for instance, if they did an A/B test on like a banner or something in the UK, and they got really good results on the open rate, really good uplift, then it would be easy for them to share the results and using the same language with A and Z. Maybe they wouldn't implement it right away because they have different demographic of customers, but like you say, it would be a starting point for them to pick up and gain some success that way.
Yeah, definitely. And that's, it's all part of that in terms of we are a global community. So how do you make the most of what you've learned for each other within that process? And one thing just to add, actually, within my wider responsibility, I also have our experimentation we do on the website. So we have a more established centre of excellence within that in terms of working with our regional teams. And one of our learnings is we've got CRM on one side, we've got web testing on another. They have their nuances of what's different, but they have a lot of commonalities. And one of our, I guess, opportunities is going, especially for our stakeholders in our regions, is coming to this also in a common approach. So we're not doing things too differently. And that's still a bit of work in progress in terms of as we kind of go, they start getting closer or start becoming more joined in their way of working. But yeah, what we do on web, that's what we do in CRM, have nuances, but similar to before, so many commonalities which we want to share our approach with.
You just used the term global community. So what do you think makes a great global community? And then how do you keep that cohesion in a retail market that's always changing?
I'll start with CRM. They're not straightforward things to set up and move forward. As I mentioned before, we operate in 10 markets. We've got some very established markets. And actually, one of the big drivers for our global community was COVID. And you think what COVID actually created was, well, actually what we're doing now. The fact of being on a screen, more easily, more accessible with each other, Teams exploding in terms of how it's been used and having a platform where it's easy to share with the other areas. But we started off pre-COVID of having what we've got as a head of CRM in all of our regions. So on a regular basis, actually weekly, we actually come together. And this started pre-COVID. And amazingly, we still come together over that time. And I think it's really, I guess, it says a lot about that community to start with at a leadership level, that we come together, talk, have something to talk about on a regular basis. But how you get beyond the leadership and to everyone within our teams is the bit of going, okay, we've got Australian members of our team who part of our role is to be part of global conversations. So once a week can join late afternoon, early evenings as part of that. But getting that commitment for a whole range of team members is quite challenging. So I think what we've done, really in that space is how do we create using a Teams channel and starting to foster of going, we encourage people initially going, oh, we've done this bit of work. How about sharing it on our Teams channel and with our colleagues across the globe? We have in the CRM space, pure CRM space, we've probably got about 50 people across the globe in CRM. So be able to find a colleague doing something similar and sharing what you're doing is actually really exciting if you've someone in Australia or Northern Europe and didn't realise there's someone doing exactly what you're doing, or you've probably thought there is, but not seeing it. So having a space where it started off with us doing a bit of prompting, a bit of why don't you put it there? We now have a community of, again, probably over 100 people who are either in CRM or touching CRM who can see what work's going on in every market, because there's always someone publishing, here's our latest test result, here's our new activity we're doing, here's what we've learned, and other ones going, oh, we're doing that. And I think that it has a bit of a snowball effect over time where partially we can sit back a little bit in a global team of this part of it and go, is now organically happening in that space. So keeping that momentum is key, but also thinking you can't just stay with what you're doing. You've got to think, what else can you do to build communities? What common programs of work are you doing? And how do you get people, work with people who are doing the do each week, every day, to be in contact with each other on a monthly basis through the Teams channel, and build their relationships. Because it's about them building their relationships within their network, which I think makes a big difference in this space. But as I said, it hasn't come overnight. It's come with probably a lot of effort, but in the mindset of, if you do it right and you evolve, you learn, you test what works, doesn't work, that community will start to thrive more as we go. To even a point where a lot of the time our CRM community across marketing is used as a gold standard or even platinum standard in terms of how things could work when you're trying to think what other areas there are commonalities, which there are plenty across our marketing teams.
I think it's very interesting, just talking about tools like Teams. So I was working in, business redesign before COVID, and anyone that was going agile or cross-functional, co-location was this key thing. All of the consultants were turning up and saying, you must be co-located to make this right. And I went into a big telco. I didn't believe them, by the way. I definitely see the benefit of people being in the same place, but is it a requirement? And I went into a big telco that had offices all over the UK and offices in India and offices in other offshore centres. And they said, no, we don't need to be co-located. They had Teams and Slack and Confluence and all of these tools that made it very easy for people to communicate with each other without having to be sat next to each other. And I think you're right that then COVID accelerated everyone's kind of taking up of those tools. But if you give people the means with which to communicate, and give them a reason to communicate, and once they start realizing that their colleagues are pretty smart as well, right, and there's stuff that they can steal with pride, you will find people start to bond and work together and collaborate more.
Yeah, I definitely, and we've seen that. There's always a bit of me that always goes, as much as it's great in terms of you've got these online platforms, it's at times also still doesn't replace those moments of face to face. In terms of where you build that, especially with people from another market. I'm fortunate enough that I've met most of the people across our markets, whether they've come to our way or I've gone their way. And actually, when you're building relationships and actually trust, those calls you have, and that's the example with Australia, is you have a moment at the beginning of your day, at the end of their day, and both of you are very different mindsets of what's happened at that point. If you don't give the opportunity, and not everyone can do this, but if you don't give the opportunity to build something outside of that, then when things aren't easy and you're not agreeing, and that obviously will happen in any business, is then harder than you're only working for pure working relationship, not that bit of extra on the outside where you've got to know each other a bit more to understand where your behaviours kind of diverge in that space, so you know what you might need to act differently or do things differently about in that space.
Remotely, sometimes it just looks different building relationships, right? Like you have to maybe make an extra effort to jump on that call one-to-one with someone, where as in the office you might overhear a conversation or whatever it is. It just looks slightly differently, but it's still about, like you say, carving out that time to build the relationship and build the trust amongst people, not just ringing people up when you've got a complaint or when there's like a very specific piece of work that needs doing or you need information from them.
Yeah, it always goes back to investing. So we've all got a job to do. My job being in that global space where my job is to foster those global relationships. So I've always tried to look, how do I put the effort into doing that a little bit extra? So that's going to make everyone's lives easier down the line in terms of actually what you're trying to achieve.
I think just on that, so you spoke a lot there about the sort of global community and fostering and encouraging people to collaborate on all levels. But I imagine when you are implementing global programs or want to implement global CX programs, you have to get the buy-in from local leaders, and they have competing priorities that maybe don't align with your sort of strategic goals. So how do you engage with local leaders and try and get that buy-in?
Ongoing challenge. I think and the challenge actually is positive in a way, because as Specsavers, we are successful as a business, and all of our teams have got amazing, well-planned annual plans. And I think one of the things I've learned over the years, and this is definitely an evolution of your learning working in global roles, of you think you've got a great idea that is going to benefit everyone, and it might, and in some cases it definitely would, but not for everyone at that point in time. And I think over time is learning in terms of actually being really working close with those people who are, again, you're trying to influence, and understand in terms of where they are with their prioritization, what do they really need, and how can we start fitting into their plans. So as a business and I guess in a global function, we're not in a position where what we say goes, and we wouldn't want to be. It's actually it's a like with our stores, we've got partnerships. It's partnerships across the business in terms of we've all got a common business goal we're working towards, but where we all sit within those plans can be different. So spending time to build what that influence, to understand in terms of who are you trying, of building that influence, that circle of influence, and really to understand in terms of what we're trying to move is key. So if you can start aligning the work, building the buy-in, building the awareness and acceptance, it's not acceptance, but the awareness that the project is of value to them, and will also help them deliver some of their plans, it makes a difference. In that, there's a thing to consider in terms of globally, it does take longer to do certain things, to bring things along. So even though you might have agreed things at a certain point, when you come to give the end goal of that, then people's priorities are moved. So I think one of the other challenges to always keep on top of is how do you continuously stay on top of where people's priorities are and where they're shifting, and making sure that you're iterating your plans as you go. As I've said before, I think global roles are really exciting. They're also just as frustrating, in terms of thinking of how you move things forward and thinking, oh, we're in a great path, we're going a certain direction, and something out of anyone's control comes along and you go, they can't quite do it then, and then it moves everyone out of sync. And then you're trying to think, how do you bring it back together? So I think my main thing, again, a bit of a repeat of myself, is keeping close to the stakeholder, the heads of in the region, and making sure they're up to date with where you are, so that even if you're working with their teams, priorities can flex, and you would need to flex as a whole community where needed. And there's also a bit of give and take. So are we doing a piece of work for the greater good, i.e. globally for everyone, and it might benefit me or a region slightly more than another region at this point in time, but later on it could benefit them more in certain ways. So that's kind of how I'd assist the starting point of the learnings over the years, of be a lot closer to spend as much time as you can to understand their plans and where you fit in, and build a trust in what you're doing is going to benefit them.
And then going back to what you said earlier, that's easier if you've managed to form those personal relationships as well and establish that trust where you can just have a friendlier conversation, right?
We're all people in the end of the day. And then people, we've all got our own personalities. We all want to succeed in what we're doing. What success to everyone is could be slightly different based on what's currently in front of them. But we're all there to make sure we're heading in the right direction. So as long as we're all, I think there's a lot we do in this space to go, we've got trust to go, we can challenge each other, go, actually that's not quite ready for us, or challenge back, why isn't it ready for you? And then have a better understanding. That makes a big difference.
I think Chantelle's definitely happier challenging me since we've got drunk and sang karaoke together. So, striking up those personal bonds helps.
Exactly.
I used to work
also being relaxed, isn't it, in front of people?
A previous company
I disagree
I worked
with Mark all the time now.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've got some closing questions for you, Rob. These ones are a little bit more personal, but so feel free to answer however you want. What's one piece of advice you'd give to CX leaders trying to roll out a global initiative for the first time?
Yeah, I think it's similar to what I said before, around actually really understand who you're trying to influence and why it's important to not just yourself, but to them and what you do. So if you can build that relationship, so you can have that trust and you understand their needs, it can actually make those initiatives tangible and a benefit to them and the business as a whole. So yeah, that's where I would kind of really focus my time and effort in those. It's not even about the idea to start with. It's about knowing that whatever idea you've got, it won't land on flat ears purely on not having that relationship in place.
Outside of Specsavers, are there any other brands that you look up to or admire and think, yeah, they do a great job globally while still being relevant to their customers locally?
I look at the things like whether it's Disney or Netflix in terms of, and they're probably common for lots of people, but in the reality of they're everywhere. And actually, whether this is how they're working locally or purely their use of data to make it feel like they're working locally, in terms of how they really understand the need of the people in wherever they are, whatever they're watching, whatever that they're recommending. I think it's quite, actually as a data person as well at heart, it's going how they use information that's relevant no matter who you are. I think that's just really exciting to see. And obviously that's evolved a lot over the years. You think it started with the Netflix in terms of what we kind of expect there to now every platform.
Netflix is a great one though, because one of the things that Netflix has done is got people used to watching things with subtitles. So shows like Squid Game or award-winning movies like Parasite, they've got people used to watching things with subtitles. Whereas if you weren't used to that, with so much content being in certain languages, you could only keep your own language in your own region. But by getting us all more used to watching things with subtitles, we're happy to watch something that's in the wrong language and have subtitles on. And so now they can take their global content pace and put it in all places.
Well, I've even noticed personally, because I think that's just quite funny, where I think we're watching Disney and myself and my wife, we share an account, and sometimes I was watching something, I kept turning off the subtitles for me at certain points, and she went, "Stop turning it off, I want it on." And then I just now got used to it. And I'm going, it's just there. So, and
I
actually,
don't like
sometimes
subtitles, I'm with you.
going back to accessibility and just getting used to it, these things being in place, you go, in the past, you think, am I watching something in the wrong language and it's been dubbed or whatever it might be, to now going, okay, that's just there. I also think in a multi-screen world, where if I think around even social media, where whether that's a TikTok or whatever it might be, a lot of times it's got basically the words there, so you can read what's happening and watch something on another screen. Don't know why we do it, but it becomes more second nature now, I think.
Who's been the greatest professional influence on your career, and what did you learn from them?
It's quite a one to think about, but I think I've had a few influences, especially in recent years. But there's one I kind of called out from about 5 or so years ago, where there was a previous leader of our team, and there's something he said to me once, and this was when we were going through a lot of change within the business, and I was being asked to be part of some transformation programs. And me being quite a person that likes to know, well, what I might get involved in, what that might mean, is this program had a lot of unknowns, but a lot of opportunity. And a lot to kind of go, and it would be great to be involved in how we might change where we do things in the business. And in my questioning of always going, what does it involve? What's it going to mean to me? A bit of advice he gave to me was, have a think about how you be comfortable in being uncomfortable. And in a world of change that always happens around you, you can always try and spend your time trying to think of what it means. But if you spend too much time thinking about that, you get stuck of not doing the do and not being involved in it. So for me, it's something I've taken forward into a lot of what I'm thinking and trying to kind of portray to some of my teams as well, is you never know what's happening, but go along with the ride. We as Specsavers have grown as a business significantly, and part of that has been a lot of unknown. So just being things being unknown is uncomfortable. But if you can have a set of, a part of you that goes, I'm comfortable with that, And that can be for a lot of people. And it was for me, it was a bit of a, I'm not sure. But yeah, it's being comfortable with being uncomfortable is something which is a thing I never thought of about 10 years ago. I'd say I'd be happy to do.
Good advice.
That is solid advice. I'll take that away with me.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time, Rob. And yeah, thanks for joining the podcast.
Oh, no, thank you very much. It's been great talking, and actually really great to kind of talk around this subject, because really kind of passionate in terms of what we do in this space at Specsavers and what I've been doing over the last, probably 8 years in this specific space. But yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks, Rob. That was a great conversation with Rob. It was really lovely to see his passion come across. Loved how he spoke about fostering a global community and the notion of stealing with pride. I thought that was really nice, a nice way to capture the fact that they're trying to move towards the same target, and it's about teamwork and not, and moving towards a shared objective.
Yeah, not competing with each other. He was talking about actually the customer journey is common everywhere, and I thought that was a really great thought. Because I suppose when you are thinking, if we were talking to clients about building a good customer journey, you're trying to think about all of the different reasons that a customer might interact with you or why you would interact with them. And then it's about making sure you've got an experience to serve at all of those times. And so if he's then creating that into a global framework, it means you can go to each of those regions and say, you need to know how you're going to help a customer if they're making a booking, or they're coming and picking up their contact lens subscription, or they have a query. You need to have built an experience for that. It doesn't mean that every region has to build the same experience for that, but you can at least say to everyone, you need to have these things in place to do a good job for a customer. And I really get how that could work as a global framework that then allows the regions to respond to it in their own way.
Yeah, exactly. Encouraging that local innovation. Obviously, not every person's going to be the same in Australia versus here, but they're going to have that same experience with Specsavers. So whether it's tailoring the content or making small tweaks to the campaign, that's the local innovation part. That's also important. Thanks for listening to the CX Equation. Please like, subscribe, share, spread the word. We'll see you next time.
Thanks very much. The CX Equation is brought to you by TapCXM. To find out more about what we do and how we can help you, visit tapcxm.com.
And then make sure to search for the CX Equation in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you usually find your podcasts. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes.
On behalf of the team here at TapCXM, thank you for listening.